Good afternoon.
I would like to call to order the January 13th, January 13th CRA meeting, and the time is 3:32. Comments from the public for non-agenda items. We do have one. Jay Gawali.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
I'm here to give you an update on my project 717 North Tamron.
Great.
Pretty much we finished, we're done. We've been going through inspections. We had a plumbing inspection, which we passed and failed at the same time. We passed because everything was, all the fixtures outside the restroom and inside were connected correctly and up to code, except a couple of items like the sink was positioned different than the plan, facing a different way. So I have to do a revision and submit it by the first of next week, and we'll be done. Everything complete. It's a short update, but that's all I have.
Well, thank you for getting back to us with the update.
No problem. Thank you. Appreciate it. Hopefully, it will be open by the end of the month.
Okay.
Thank
Look
you.
forward to that. Thank you. Comments from the board. Madam President,
No comments. Thank you, Mayor.
Commissioner Peduzzi,
No comment. Thank you, Mayor.
Commissioner Neary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the update, and I look forward to, I think we had talked about maybe doing like a community grand opening or something so that we can let the community know that we're back and that you're back. And, I've talked about this before. Those, I'm sure there's a better name for it, but those corner stores are so important to a community, especially communities where the opportunity to go out and to a grocery store is not readily available, especially by car. So I know it's been a long journey, but the reason why it was so important and why I try to stay on top of that is because, again, as a commissioner who was once a young person who used the type of store that you own, sir, literally as a way to help sustain my family when it came to groceries, milk, cereal, different things like that. So I just wanted to be clear why I've tried to stay on that, because again, there are folks in the community that really depend on your services.
No, that's fine. And once we started the construction, we ran across a lot of problems, and it was a real bad building. And I don't cut corners, so I had to go and do everything new. I actually took half the building down and built it up, as you see. I am planning to do a big block party and barbecue and stuff. I have discussed it with Ms. Baker. I didn't know if this is the right time to bring it up or not, but that is my plan, because I always do the same thing in Riviera Beach, and I've been doing it for a long time. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Ross.
No comment.
Commissioner Schoaf.
Thank you, Mayor. Also looking forward to that grand opening. If we could, Ms. Justice, get an update on the anchor site, please?
Yes, Mayor, Commissioners, the anchor site, they will have some terms. They've amended their term sheet a bit. We are currently reviewing the amended term sheet, and we'll have something to them either by the end of this week or beginning of next week. They also owe us some additional information, some additional pro forma information that we are waiting on from the developer as well on this.
Okay.
Anything else?
No, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Item 2, resolution number 20-7, authorizing the reappointments to the Community Redevelopment Area Advisory Board as follows. J. Russell Green for the period 2020 through 2023. Charles Adams for the period January 2020 through January 2023. Michael Howe for the period January 2020 through January 2023. And T. Denise Williams for the period January 2020 through January 2023. Any discussions, comments? If not, I will entertain a motion.
Mayor, move to approve resolution number 20-7.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition, same sign. Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Consent calendar, consent items. Items 3 to 4 are consent. Any questions, comments? If not, we'll entertain a motion for approval of the consent calendar.
Mayor, move to approve consent.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, like sign. Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 5, resolution number 20-2, authorizing the purchase of real property and execution of a purchase and sale agreement between the West Palm Beach Community Redevelopment Agency and Glozal Village LLC for the purchase of real property located at 618 7th Street and authorizing the execution of a quitclaim deed for the conveyance of a CRA-owned property located at 2115 Beautiful Avenue to Glozal Village LLC as a part of the transaction.
Mr. Waldron will make this presentation.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Grant Waldron, CRA Real Estate Manager. The CRA is requesting approval to enter into a purchase-sale agreement. Requesting approval to enter into a purchase and sale agreement with Glozal Village. The property is located, as you can see on the screen, right here.
I need you to be careful to talk into the mic because this is being recorded, yeah.
The property is located in the historic Northwest District. Along with the purchase of 618, we are going to convey CRA-owned property located at 2115 Beautiful Ave to Glozal as a part of the transaction. And as you can see here, this is the breakdown of the transaction. We're going to purchase 618 from Glozal for $150,000. Along with the purchase, we're going to convey 2115 Beautiful Avenue to Glozal, which has a total land value of $18,533. You add up both as-is value of 2115 and the total cash value as-is for the acquisition of 618. We have a total purchase price of $168,533. And this acquisition is critical to the development of the 7th Street and Passageway project. And Ms. Baker can talk about some more of the highlights of that project. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon or good evening, Mayor and Commissioner. Gina Baker, Project Manager, Historic Northwest. This acquisition is critical to the development of the 7th Street project. I am going to shudder to name give you the name of the project because there's been some consternation over it being called Sticks. But where this building actually sits, it sits right in the gateway or the opening of the Henrietta extension that will wrap around the back of Queen of Sheba. In addition, this property is part of the Glozal development or the Rosemary Village properties, which is a 52 affordable housing portfolio developed many, many years ago. And as part of the restrictive covenant, it's affordable housing, so you cannot simply tear the house down and not relocate the individuals that's in the home. We are required to relocate them. So part of the acquisition cost is to cover that cost. And 2115 is part of this deal because we didn't have additional lots in the historic Northwest to equal out the total sale or total purchase price. That's all I have.
Okay. Any questions, comments? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion for approval.
Motion, Mayor, to approve resolution number 20-2.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. There is none. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 6, resolution number 20-4, approving a conveyance agreement between the West Palm Beach Community Redevelopment Agency and Glozal Village LLC to convey the CRA-owned properties located at 613 10th Street, 621 10th Street, and 1109 Henrietta Avenue to Glozal Villages LLC.
Yes, so the three properties are located here at the corner of 10th Street and Henrietta Avenue. The CRA intends to enter into a conveyance agreement with Glozal Village, and they intend to build affordable homes there. Glozal Village currently owns 3 housing units located at 612 Second Street and 614 Second Street. Now, this property, along with the adjacent lot and the lot down at the corner of Banyan Boulevard and North Rosemary Avenue, are currently under approval for a 120-unit development project. And in order to move forward with the development project, they need to relocate these 3 residential housing units as a part of a restrictive covenant from the Florida Housing Finance Corporation. So in order for them to do that, we need to convey the 1109 Henrietta and the 621 10th Street and 613 10th Street properties. And here's just a location map highlighting where the properties are located, the CRA properties and the Glozal properties. And Ms. Baker can go into further detail on the project.
So real quickly for clarification, we've been working with the Planning and Zoning Department for several months now with a developer who's looking to do this project at the corner of Banyan and Rosemary. Part of the design layout would include having to do an L-shaped design that would incorporate those properties at 612 and 614 Second Street. Again, these are part of the Glozal portfolio. As you can see, these houses were probably strategically located based on lot availability at the time. Now they're strategically not located conveniently, and we're having to try to relocate them so that we can do a nice entry feature into the historic Northwest. This conveyance has come about as, if you will, an in-kind incentive. There's no cash dollars being transferred here. We have 3 vacant lots for those homes to be relocated to or reconstructed in the heart of the historic Northwest, and we would ask that the board consider us doing that conveyance.
Okay, any questions? Commissioner Shelf.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. I just want to make sure I understand this transaction, because similar to the one that we just looked at, the one we just looked at was kind of a swap, an even-up swap. And on this one, we're looking at taking housing that exists in one location, moving it to a separate location, but in essence, we're conveying land to this developer. Is that correct?
That is correct, and that conveyance would not transpire until we get certain assurances that the development is going forward.
Okay, and so at the time of confirmed development, what we are in essence is doing is, I'm not an appraiser, I'll consider the lots are maybe $20,000 a piece, which was akin to what we had in the last presentation. So it's in essence a $60,000 in-kind incentive in exchange for this development. So on the details of this development, are there public benefits that we're sharing about this development? Is it an affordable housing development? What are the details there?
All of those details will be coming back before you at some point during the project approval, but they will be affordable housing. There are going to be some features that the developer is willing to offer as it relates to the streetscape design on Rosemary. And then we will probably be asking for some entry feature signage at Rosemary and Banyan. One of the key real issues here is that we're going to be exchanging these lots for brand-new housing units. The existing Rosemary Village inventory is functionally obsolete at this point. If any of you have seen these houses close up, you'll notice that there is no back door, which means that the occupants have no real convenient way to get from their house into a backyard and enjoy some of the same amenities that you and I might enjoy. So one of the major public benefits out of this transfer is that we'll be getting some new housing stock in the Northwest.
If I may.
Yeah, but let me ask a quick question. You said there was no back door.
That is correct. Look closely.
How does that get approved?
I wasn't here, sir.
Okay, Commissioner Shelf.
Thank you. Gina, just so I can clarify on that too. So in essence, if these lots are not being conveyed until time of development, it would all go hand in hand with the development. We're just bringing this piece forward first. And second question is, we're getting new housing stock. The CRA is not funding that new housing stock. Glosal Village will fund that new housing stock and presumably get a better housing stock with houses with back doors.
That is the plan. As a
Okay.
matter of fact, let me just back up. Can you back this up for me real quick? This is just a sort of a conceptualization of what the houses might look like. Certainly, the Historic Preservation Board is going to have a little bit more to say about that. But these houses will be brand new housing stock, and we will make sure that they are fitting for a historic neighborhood.
Thank you.
And for the record, on that proposed rear elevation, that's a door, right?
That looks like a door. If you look at the
Okay.
bottom line there, yeah. Thank you, Mayor.
It's small, but it's a
Thank
door.
you for that acknowledgement. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Neary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I brought this up at a commission work session around, it's many years ago, and I guess the city entered into worked with the Chodo to develop this housing, and it's one of the, I think, it's here nor there because it happened, but I think one of the big injustices that has happened to our community, to build a house without a back door, and there are plenty of them in the neighborhood, so I'm happy to hear that.
Well, there's 52 of them to be exact.
Plenty, yeah, exactly. So, but I didn't realize it was 52, so even more so, I think, pitiful, quite frankly. But I'm happy to hear that we're acknowledging that, and that as we move forward, we're righting that injustice, because that's exactly what that was, yeah.
Thank you
Thanks.
for your acknowledgement.
So there's 52. So is anything being done to address, I mean, I know it's probably outside the bailiwick of this body, but, okay, all right, can I get a list of those, please? And then we'll see what, if anything, can be done. Wow.
I'll go through our interim director to get you that list, as well as have a more vocal conversation about that development in total.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments on this particular item? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, motion to approve resolution number 20-4.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, like sign. There is none. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 7, resolution number 20-3, authorizing the acceptance of insurance proceeds in the amount of $481,423.95 related to the property located at 609 8th Street, AKA the Sunset Lounge, and resolution number 20-5F, providing the receipt and appropriation of $481,423 of insurance proceeds for the redevelopment of 609 8th Street, AKA the Sunset Lounge. Before we go any further, Ms. Justice, I assume the item in the F resolution, the amount should be identical to the amount in the resolution, meaning there's 95 cents?
Yes, there's 95 cents that needs to be amended on the, I guess on the,
All right, so when the motion is made, assuming that there is a motion for approval for the F resolution, we need to make sure that correct amount is stated, correct?
correct.
Yes? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Or who's presenting on this?
I am Mayor. This, back in 2017, the Sunset Lounge received some wind damage to the exterior roof and some water damage to the interior. We did receive insurance proceeds in the amount listed here at $481,423.95. This is a resolution to accept those insurance proceeds, which will go back into the Sunset Lounge.
Questions, comments? Yes, Madam President.
Thank you. Just to confirm, I know we talked about this at agenda review, but if the funds, this is going into the Sunset Lounge, overall funds, but if for some reason the funds were not utilized, then these funds would then go back into the CRA general fund that then could be used and dispersed on other projects?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion.
Mayor, motion to approve resolutions numbers 20-3 and 20-5F to receive $481,423.95 respectively.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. There is none. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 8, resolution number 20-1, authorizing development incentives for Neil Kozakoff's Parkland on the Park LLC Broward Block Multifamily Project under the CRA's Real Estate Development Accelerator Grant Program.
Mr. Kozakoff is here this evening. I'm going to present just the basics of the Real Estate Development Accelerator Grant application and the program, and then Mr. Kozakoff is going to give you some history about his projects and what he is requesting as well.
Okay?
So the RETA grant is a performance-based tax incentive. It's development projects over $5 million. We've done several throughout the CRAs, both the downtown, and not many in the Northwood Village, Pleasant City CRA, but we've done a couple downtown. We can use them for land cost, development cost, relocation, demo, infrastructure, or assembly. It can be a grant that happens through either capital investment or a TIF deal, which this is a combination of both, as you'll see as we move forward here. The project is located at Broward Avenue and 210 Piccadilly Street. You'll see in the Curry corridor. And Mr. Kozakoff will go over this a little bit, but one thing I want to note, in your backup material, this is changed in the agreement that the mayor will sign if you approve. We had some last minute changes. The building is a 90 square foot building. In your backup, it says it's a 71,214 square foot building. 102 rental units, 113 on-site parking spaces, and there'll be public right-of-way infrastructure and landscaping improvements as part of this building. The infrastructure improvements, which is part of what Mr. Kozakoff is requesting for the grant, is $260,246.50, and then he's estimated his hard cost improvements to be just over $19 million. So when we look at how we calculate this grant, the current assessed property value is $186,000, a new capital investment of around $19 million, and then we're estimating the new assessed value of around $16 million. Obviously, that will depend on the market and the property appraiser, but that's what it's estimated at for this grant. The proposed incentive from the CRA, what we're asking for is a reimbursement of $260,000 towards infrastructure improvements, and these are public right-of-way infrastructure improvements, water, sewer, drainage, as well as a reimbursement of 50% of the taxes for 15 years, his TIF from the deal, not to exceed $2 million. Again, there's an asterisk by this because as part of the backup, there was no cap on this. Statutorily, the CRA has to put a cap on our incentives. So we have put it at $2 million. We estimate it to be around 1.5, but we want to make sure that if property values do increase, that Mr. Kozakoff will receive the benefits from those property value increases. Just to kind of go over the calculation, the new assessed value, you multiply that by the current millage, city and county, which is what the CRA gets. We receive 95% of that new assessed value, and which is approximately $200,000 annual TIF to the CRA. If 50% goes back to Mr. Kozakoff, he'd be receiving approximately $100,000 annually for 15 years, again, where we got the estimation of $1.5 million. For purposes of this grant, we put a cap not to exceed $2 million. That is all I have on the business end of the presentation, but Mr. Kozakoff will present about the project, and then we're happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of Ms. Justice as Mr. Kozakoff is making his way to the podium? Okay. Mr. Kozakoff?
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners, fellow citizens. I appreciate your time. This is all about the Leora.
State your name for the record.
Sorry,
just
Neil
so it's-
Kozakoff, principal of the Parkland companies. The Leora is developed by Parkland. It's 102 units. It's in Northwood. For those of you who don't know me, I have been around for a long time. We have been the only major developer who has repeatedly delivered projects in Northwood over the last 22 years. You are all probably familiar with most of these. That's the old Relish site. Charmers to the right. Pershing Suites is lower left corner, and then of course 312 Northwood, which is the companion to the building that we're presenting here to you today. The model for the Broward building, which I'm presenting, is 312 Northwood, which most of you, I think, are familiar with. It was a shot that we took 5 years ago. There was some skepticism about whether you could put Class A housing in Northwood and Curry District, and fortunately, our gamble paid off. It has stabilized the Curry District. It has helped minimize or stabilize the homeless situation over there. It's had a major impact on Northwood Road, and I mean, it has 150 people living in it who come and go all day long, and of course, use the services and restaurants on Northwood Road. So it's been a big success. It's 98% occupied. Our rents have stayed competitive. We have a fairly low turnover, and we're very management intensive. So I think you would hear from most of our residents that they're quite happy with the location. Anyway, it's the site for the new building is outlined in red. I'm sorry, it's a little small, but what it highlights is how much undeveloped land there still is in this neighborhood, and piece by piece, we're trying to change that. This is what the new building looks like. It's kind of a close cousin of the first one, a little more modern. Again, it's low rise. It was approved under the original CMUD zoning 7 years ago. Today, you could put a 9 or an 11-story building on this site, which we elected not to go back and do. The new building is 102 units. It's got studios, 1 and 2 bedrooms. The smallest units start at 550 square feet. We have rent starting at $1,500 per month. We have the amenities typically found in a larger building. We have the pool, the gym, the lounge, barbecue kitchen, coffee station, et cetera. The Leora will add 150 more residents to the neighborhood. It will further stabilize. As Allison pointed out, it will add about $16 million to the tax base. It adds permanent jobs because there's staff that has to run the building. It adds construction, a lot of construction jobs. And what we hope is that it will encourage further development. I wanted to kind of compare and contrast for a second 312 Northwood, the original building, versus the new one. They were both approved at the same time by the same, in front of the commission 7 years ago. They're very comparable, but what has happened is that construction costs have increased by about 20%. So whereas we were able to build the initial building with a very conventional debt and equity structure, it simply doesn't work anymore. Financially, it just doesn't work. So we wanted to build a building, so we identified a HUD 221D4 loan, which is HUD saying that we think this project, because of its location and its quality, is worthy of a high loan-to-value, long-term, 40-year, fully amortizing rate. It is hard to get. We haven't finished it yet, but we've been invited to apply, which is a big deal. As I may have mentioned to some of you, I had to go to Jacksonville and basically present in front of about 10 people and show them the merits of the project. Anyway, the way the project works is with this HUD 221D4 loan plus CRA support, and as you've been advised, it's $260,000 of infrastructure grant plus the tax abatement. The infrastructure, just technically so you can kind of see what's happening, it runs along Broward Avenue here and Piccadilly Street, and it should be noted that it not only benefits this property, but will benefit future development. So it's for the whole neighborhood. And the project it'll keep the whole neighborhood going. I mean, that's the idea. You know, we were successful once. We'd like to be successful again, and hopefully we have other developers who will continue to follow on, and the Northwood will finally kind of be what we all have hoped it would be for many years. So, any questions, please?
Mr. Kozakov, thank you very much for the presentation, and thank you for your history of investment in this neighborhood and your perseverance. Quick question, how did you come up with the name, the Leora?
It's my daughter's name.
Oh,
It's,
oh, nice.
if you go way back in development history, developers, many in the 20s and 30s, would always name their buildings and streets after their children. So that's kind of where I got that from.
Cool. Any other questions? Commissioner Shelf?
Thank you, Mayor. And, I think this being my district, it's right outside my door. And Ms. Justice said we don't do a lot of these RETA grant programs in the Pleasant City Northwood area because we don't have a lot of projects over $5 million. And, we have someone here today who I thank very much for taking a risk and putting this kind of investment in our neighborhood once. And I think one of the important things that I want to note out of the presentation we received today is I really hope that if this were to move forward today, that some of our incentive dollars would do just that and incentivize properties going further north. And if it's one less barrier to entry to have someone else bring a $5 million project, I think it's well worth it. And, I think looking at the other portion of this, on the TIF development deal, just to note as CRA advisory, this was presented to the CRA. And at the time, the CRA advisory board wanted to approve it with no cap. It's only because of the statutory limit that we have to put the cap on it. And so we're very much in favor of moving this project forward, and very much in favor, I think in part because it generates its own revenue. So 50% of zero is still zero, which is what we have right now. So I think having something like this that helps generate money that is kept within the Northwood Pleasant City CRA and helps benefit the entire area is good for the district. So thank you.
Madam President?
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, and I echo Commissioner Scho's comments and the mayor's comments about appreciate your continued investment in the Northwood area. Interestingly enough, after I learned about this project, just in a random conversation, I learned that one of the coaches at the gym that I work out at downtown, she's a resident of yours at 312, and she had nothing but amazing things to say about the property.
That's always gratifying when we hear.
She said she loves living
Good,
there.
good.
And I recall when we talked before that you mentioned, it is Class A apartments and that it is a high quality item or product, but that you were able to keep the rents down. And I know that you mentioned that there'll be some studios in this new building. Do you have any sense of the rental price for these units yet?
Yes, we have projected, and it works at these numbers, starting at $1,500 a month for a studio, which is about $200 to $300 less than that same product downtown.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Baduzzi?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. I think Commissioner Lambert already covered the one issue that I wanted to talk about, is how the rents compare with the 312 building, but I think we've already gone there. It sounds like there's going to be some smaller units available that might make it easier for some individuals to move into the area. So I appreciate that.
We try to get everybody in.
And I did also have the opportunity to spend about an hour in the building, in the 312 building, and I was certainly impressed with what I saw, certainly impressed with the upkeep and maintenance. I think there was people cleaning the floor as we walked behind us. I was surprised at how clean the place was, and I don't think they were expecting me to be there. So thank you for that, and I look forward to having this project if it's approved.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Neary.
Thank you. And also, thanks for your interest. And we had an opportunity to meet on site, I guess, for an hour or so. Could you talk about just a little bit, because I think it was important, about both the temporary jobs but also the permanent jobs? And I know that they're local folks who benefit from that. Could you just talk a little bit about that?
Two categories, obviously, permanent, and let's talk about the temporary, or the permanent first, rather. Basically, when you run a property, you have management, you have maintenance, you have supervision. I think if you're being honest about it, it's probably 4 or 5 jobs, full-time jobs, good-paying jobs. And then on the construction side, it's run by the GC, but it's, in essence, 150 to 200 jobs over the course of a year and 4 months, something like that. So it's quite a bit of economic, quite a bit of wage generated by the project itself.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? We do have one card. Will Davis.
Good afternoon, Will Davis. I am a shop owner in Northwood Road, and I can't express how much, this would bring more of an influx of business into the Northwood Village area. So I have visited 312 on numerous occasions on some of their social entertainments by the pool, got to see the whole amenities as everyone's described. It almost feels like if you've not gone, please make an appointment, and I'm sure they will let you go see the facilities. But you go inside of some of these apartments, and it's almost like an Alice in Wonderland. Everything's very tall, very spacious, but yet very small, so you feel very quaint in these areas, which is, and it's Class A. I mean, the cabinetry, the textiles that you use throughout the entire apartment. So it's definitely, you feel that you're on the opposite side of the intercoastal. So I definitely encourage you to please consider and make this pass through. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Neil, you said the occupancy rate was what, 98%?
Yeah, we're at about 98%.
And little turnover? People?
A fair amount. I mean, better than typical Florida turnover, which tends to be, 35%, and we're probably 25%.
But you have no problem releasing the
Not at all.
units? Good.
Not at all. No. In fact, I have to give my team all the credit because owner management is owner management, and it's a different style than hiring a third party that comes in and is just driven by metrics and performance benefits. So
That's great. Any other questions, comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move to approve resolution number 20-1.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Questions, comments? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Good
thank
luck.
you, Mayor and
Yeah,
Commissioners. I appreciate it.
Item 9. A discussion regarding the disposition of 520 Northwood Road, confirmation of contract award to Skunk Works LLC, and directing staff to negotiate a purchase and sale agreement.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. Sarah Blake, Project Manager. I am here to represent to you the sale of CRA-owned property located at 520 Northwood Road and the CRA Advisory Board's recommendation to award Skunk Works LLC. I will begin by going over the basics, and then Steve Carlson, owner of Skunk Works, is here to go into his proposal in more detail. This gives you a bird's eye view of the location, and it really shows the prominence of its location on Northwood Road and the importance of filling that vacancy with an active use. This shows you the existing exterior, which is historic. And this is the existing interior, which is in very bad condition and will probably require interior demolition. And just the timeline of how we got here. In October of 2018, we received an unsolicited proposal from GHRE Investments, LLC. In order to entertain that, we did have to issue an invitation to negotiate, and we received 0 responses in February. CRAB did recommend that we reissue that ITN to allow Northwood Village merchants the opportunity. So we did receive 2 additional responses by Skunk Works and Day by Day. We brought that to the CRA Advisory Board to award, with the recommendation to award Skunk Works LLC, which the CRA Board agreed with. We then brought that to you all in July, in which Day by Day Shop was disqualified and the board took no action. In August 2019, Commissioner Schoaf, on behalf of the CRA Advisory Board, requested that the item be brought back for reconsideration. We brought that back to the CRA Advisory Board because there were a few new members, and we represented Skunk Works' proposal, where they, again, for the second time, approved that proposal, which is why we're here today for a reconsideration from you all. So our recommendation is to approve the CRA Advisory Board's and the staff's recommendation to award Skunk Works LLC the property located at 520 Northwood Road, and then it directs staff to begin negotiations to develop a purchase and sale agreement, which will be brought back to you all for final approval. And on that, I'm going to bring up Steve Carlson of Skunk Works to go into his proposal in detail. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Stephen Carlson. I'm the owner of Skunk Works, located at 525 Northwood Road. We're hoping to open within the next few weeks. We just got our CO on December 27th after a very long period of construction and frustration. But putting that aside, I wanted to start off by thanking you all for hearing my proposal again today, and at the same time apologizing for not being present in July when you first tried to deal with this matter. I was unfortunately out of town for a family emergency and I couldn't attend. I did, however, watch the live stream of the hearing, so to speak, and hopefully I got a grasp of what your questions were and concerns were, both you and the public who spoke. So with that in mind, I'll try and make this brief and just represent what's going on and what we would like to do with the property in question so you can make your decision. So this is basically, just real quick, we'll go through what the brewery looks like as of a couple months ago. This is just basically the brewery equipment that's been installed at 525 Northwood Road. And all this equipment is, and this is the bar a couple months ago at 525 Northwood. So this brewery is simply a microbrewery where we're going to produce beer for local consumption and for some small distribution. It's in a very small space. As you'll be able to see from this diagram, it's a pretty cramped area. It's a 1,750 square foot facility, and we've packed a lot into it, and I think we can get a lot out of it. What we can't do there is accommodate a growing trend in the brewing industry, which is to produce barrel-aged premium products. And so from the onset of this project, I've been looking for a space somewhere to accommodate that. And when this property came to my attention, I thought it would be a perfect suit. These concepts have been proven in lots of places. The most prominent one is probably in Asheville, which is probably the industry standard for this type of facility, where they have a brewery called Wicked Weed Brewing, which is a pretty big brewery, and then they have a barrel house called the Funkatorium. And they do all kinds of crazy brewing at the Funkatorium, and they do their standard brewing in their brewery. And it works out really well because their products are a little bit different. The barrel-aged beers are a premium product, and they take a long time to mature and whatnot. And it seems to be working. I was hoping to be, if not the first, one of the first to do this in Florida, but it looks like there's a place in St. Petersburg that beat me to it a couple months ago. So it's a trend that, my point is, it's a trend that's moving around, and it seems to be very popular, and it attracts a lot of attention. I've been fielding phone calls since we first popped up on Google from not just local people asking when we're opening, but also from people from out of state who are traveling into town who just want to know if they can come and check out the place. So it does get exposure beyond the local boundaries. The summary of our offer is pretty simple. It's offering $15,000 in cash, permits to be submitted within 60 days of a sale, construction to be complete within 8 months of permit approval. I can say that with some certainty, even though I've gone through a really lengthy construction period, because the facilities are not similar in terms of technical requirements. The barrel house is essentially a lot of racks to facilitate barrels, small 15-gallon wooden barrels, and a tap room. So it's not as complicated as putting the plumbing in a brewery together and then getting the engineering done to deem it safe in the eyes of the city building department. Construction costs are estimated around $140,000, and our proposed use is a barrel house, tasting room, and event space. And I think this is where my presence probably would have been pretty helpful last time you looked at this proposal. A barrel house it's not a warehouse for barrels. It's just a place, it's just a name for a place where you mature beer in wooden casks. You also serve it at that location. My intent would be to produce these premium products in the main brewery of Skunk Works at 525, and then transferring some of that contents over to the 520 building to mature. So both places, the proximity to each other helps us a lot in terms of keeping costs down. and keeping the process simple. It also serves to eliminate, without getting too technical, some contamination that occurs between yeast strains. So there are different types of yeast they're used, and they easily can contaminate one small brewery that's as compact as Skunk Works is. In terms of jobs, it's a 1,200 square foot space, I believe, or maybe a little bit less. And we're looking at maybe 4 service staff or 5, a yeast technician, a barrel technician. This is actually a pretty difficult job. And we'd be happy to take local applicants for internships. The impact and benefits, no one's in more of a hurry to get this done than I am. So I can promise you my best effort for an expeditious renovation to that storefront, which is, you know, if I don't do it, please someone do this. It's a mess over there and it looks terrible. The generation of tourism, I reviewed earlier, some local job and internship opportunities. Construction of a facility that would definitely be unique to at least the area, if not Florida. It's southern Florida for sure. And the property would be owner occupied. I currently lease the space I'm in for the main brewery. I get a lot of questions of what is taking so long to open a brewery. I am also on the board for the Palm Beach Brewers Association, the Palm Beach Brewers Alliance, which was started by the Economic Development Office here in the city. And I can only tell you that 1.5 years is average, 2 years isn't crazy. I probably would have been open this summer had I not had an incredible termite infestation that required me to tear down a whole lot of new construction and replace the ceiling beams. So I hope that answers any kind of questions in terms of what is taking so long. But like I said, we just got our CO. Paperwork's being filed for the licensing, which couldn't be done until CO was issued, and hopefully that will be open very quickly. And I'd be happy to field any questions.
On that point, you're comfortable that you can meet the timelines that are set forth in the agreement?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I will say this, though. I think there was a resolution passed not too long ago where it was agreed that there's a $25,000 incentive to do some improvements to the Northwood Village stores. Am I remembering that correctly? As to bring things up to code for new owners. I think the timeline that, I don't know if that's been approved. I thought that was in the works or it had been approved, but it has been approved. The timeline on that was 120 days. Just as a side note, I don't think that's very realistic for anything technical that goes on. It certainly won't apply to me, but I'll try for it to apply, but I just wanted to throw that out there. Anyway.
Okay, all right. Commissioner Nearing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just had thanks for your presentation and thanks for your interest. I didn't see this in the backup, but was just curious. The wooden cast, the barrels themselves, you mentioned that it takes time for maturity. What's that time? Is it differ?
It does differ.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Yes, sir, it differs. It averages 6 months, some are 3, some are a year. It's like wine, basically.
Sure.
Some you can sit on a shelf for 5 years, but I mean, I'm not in that business. The facility wouldn't accommodate that. I would be looking at something with probably a 3 to 6 month turnover.
Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Shove.
Thank you, Mayor. I had one question for you and then one question for Ms. Justice. As we're looking at the activity and the timeline, I mean, what you're saying is exactly right. We want active uses on the street. So it's noting that there's 8 months from permit to approval. So if you don't meet that deadline, what would be the plan? So if part of the terms are that it's 8 months permit to approval and you're partway through, what would be the plan for that?
I was actually wondering that myself in terms of how it's negotiated typically with the city. I don't have any experience with it. I'm sure there's a penalty for not meeting a mark, and I would have to consider that in the negotiation, but I don't have an answer for you for that.
Okay.
I think 8 months is reasonable, though. I've seen stores be turned into, I think you call it white boxed in less time than that, and this is even simpler than that because I'm not even putting drywall up. It would be more exposed.
Sure, and understanding that you don't know what's behind the walls, et cetera, maybe, Ms. Justice, you can weigh in on that.
Yes, Commissioner. We have not negotiated this, so this was his proposal to us. Once if we accept his proposal, if you accept his proposal, we will negotiate the terms. So We don't have terms set in place for what would be the penalty, what are the expectations, what are the timelines.
So just to clarify, today's approval would be to take this selected recommendation, do that negotiation. You would revisit with this board as to what those terms would be, and there would be subsequent approval of terms.
Correct. You would approve the terms set forth in the agreement.
So that may answer my second question, which was over to you. We were discussing the capital improvement grant. That's the $25,000 incentive. That could or could not be a part of this term, depending upon what this board and you all
It depends on the desire of the board. That grant wasn't in place at the time that we had received the proposal, so it hasn't been taken under consideration at this point.
Okay. And if I may, Mayor?
Yes.
To follow up for the record, were there 3 proposals that were received back, Skunk Works Day by Day Shop and A&D Development?
GHRE first submitted an unsolicited proposal, which
Okay.
triggered the notice and the ITN to be issued. From that, we received 2 additional proposals.
And so I've said publicly that the CRA Advisory Board was very adamant about the selection process, and I understand by which we got here, but I think it's prudent to have this conversation of how we got here. And that process, if we had 3 people who were presenting, were any of those able to present to the CRA Advisory Board? Was it just the process that the CRA staff makes a recommendation to the CRA Advisory Board, they only see 1 presentation, or they see all 3?
Yes, for this process, the way it was handled back previously was the ITN was issued. We had discussed with procurement, and staff had a selection committee where we selected the top, our recommendation, which then our recommendation went to the CRA Advisory Board. But you're correct that the proposers did not present their proposals.
So I guess I would suggest, at the will of this board, understanding you may have 3 proposals, you may have 30 proposals, and which wouldn't be prudent to do presentations, but in the same way that this board receives presentations on other projects, the anchor site, Curry Park, et cetera, I think it would be prudent to have that process where presenters, just like we've had the presentation today, and we understand a lot more from the actual applicant, that each presenter would be able to make their own individual case after being narrowed down, perhaps by a staff board, but I put that out there for my fellow board members' edification.
So you're suggesting that we hear all 3 proposals?
I'm suggesting that future processes include presentations by a narrowed down selection of presenters so that there can be a true assessment of each individual project. Again, understanding that if it's your project, you present it best yourself.
Future projects, though.
Future projects.
Okay. Commissioner Peduzzi and then Madam President.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just curious as to whether we know the actual market value of a property in the state that it sits right now. Do we have those numbers?
I would ask, I don't know if Grant Waldron is here. We should have an appraisal on the property. I can't tell you off the top of my head what the appraisal value is. I will tell you that the only thing that can remain on this building is the facade. Maybe some of the sidewalls, the roof is out of the building, and there's some walls that are leaning. So it's essentially a complete rebuild, with the exception of the historic facade.
If I could follow up, Mayor.
Yes.
It would seem to me that the actual market value would probably be something in excess of $15,000.
Correct.
And with improvements, it looks like he's going to spend $137,800. Is that the correct number?
Yes, sir.
So if you add those together, I would assume that once the improvements have been made, that this property will have considerably more value. And I'm just wondering out loud, how much more value than what's actually being put in it?
Of course, that is the hope. And I can't give you a number again at this point, what that future value looks like. But yes, we would hope that as the assessed value would be significantly more than the value now, obviously, and the value that is being put into the building.
Madam President?
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation and for your explanation for why you couldn't be here in July. I appreciate that and understand that family issues do come up. The $137,800 that you are expecting for the construction costs, so you have been in the site and so you had someone give you a realistic bid for the work that you want done there? Is that where that amount came from?
Yes, ma'am, I had, oh, I'm sorry. Missed a couple slides here.
Thank you.
My apologies. Yes, I've had my current contractor go over it with me, my current engineer go over it with me, and my current architect go over it with me. That was, I don't remember when the open house was, but it was at least 6 or 8 months ago, something like that. So I don't know if the conditions in there have changed at all, but it's as described. It's pretty much just the facade is what's holding it all together, basically. So,
I'm just surprised that it's only $137,000 then.
Well, I wouldn't be the first time I was surprised by construction costs, so,
Sure.
and I don't think I'm the only one who can say that.
Okay, thank you. And I have a question for Ms. Justice as
Yes.
well. So I realize that should this get approved this evening, that then staff would negotiate with the applicant. That would then come back to this board for a final approval, correct?
Correct.
And what have we done in the past, or maybe this hasn't come up before, regarding, if the project doesn't get done? Let's say, for some reason, people stop drinking beer in the county or in our city,
Say that.
and he cannot move forward. He already has the land, it's already there. I mean, what provisions will be put into the agreement?
Yes, Commissioner, this does come up, obviously, with land that we have given to developers to develop. There's always a restrictive covenant on it that gives a certain time period for performance. If it does not perform, it reverts back to the CRA. At that point, it would be up to this board to decide if you want to go out to bid again on the property or how you would like to handle that property.
And I couldn't help but notice there were some slides that maybe we missed. Do you
I'm
mind just
so
showing
sorry
us?
about that. I got
Pictures are always
distracted.
worth 1,000 words.
Sorry about that. So I think we left off here. So this just illustrates the proximity of the proposed site to the current location. So top left-hand corner is the Skunk Works Brewery. And I think, by the way, Google measures footsteps. It's about 70 feet door to door to the other location. This is, I think you saw the big red orange before picture. This is a rendering of what I would hope to do with the front. I'm not sure what's going on with that paint up front, how old it is, what it consists of, but if I can blast it off, I will. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to cover it. This is a sort of a proposal for the interior. I don't think I could get it that rustic if I tried, but it would mostly be an all wood interior, with barrels lining. These are really large barrels, so over there would be a lot of small barrels and then a small tap room. So just basically a lot of wood in there. So that's the idea behind the design for the inside. So it's a warm feeling to it. This is what I was talking to you about, the Wicked Weed Funkatorium. I guess this is their gift shop. If you can look, there's a little bit of barrelage hanging out of that left-hand door there. So that's where their barrel racks are, but this is their gift shop. And like I said, they do a great business up there, and they seem to know how to make it work. So I would love to be able to emulate that, if possible, in Northwood and see if it can draw the same amount of traffic to the area. This is the example of the same thing going on over on the West Coast in St. Pete with Green Bench. They have a less intimate idea than I do. Mine, you'd be pretty much sitting with the barrels a lot closer to you and probably within reaching distance. And then here we are back to the numbers again. I think that's where we're heading.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Rouse.
Yeah, I just had a couple questions for staff. In terms of whether or not this is a good deal, do you ever look at what the appraised value of the property is?
We always get an appraisal, and I apologize. I'm assuming we do have an appraisal on the property that I do not have with me.
And do you know the square footage of this?
It's approximately 1,200 square feet, I believe.
That's right. The appraisal I saw, and I don't hold me to this, but I thought I had it about 110,000 from the,
And that's in the current condition?
I don't know how they, it's been like that for a long time, so I don't know, but that's the number they have
Do
online.
you know how old the appraisal was?
No, sir.
Okay.
Commissioner Shelf?
Thank you, Mayor. And on the financials, there's something I wanted to clarify because I know this has been a long process. The amount offered by this particular applicant was similarly suited to the other applicants. This building has been sitting vacant in the open market, and anyone could have come in with an appraisal price and scooped it up at market value. The market is not driving any kind of retail space here, and what we want is activation, which is why the CRA stepped in this particular instance. So across the board, any of the proposals did not offer full market value in the condition that it's in. I just want to make that clarification.
Any other questions or comments? We do have a couple of cards. Matt Chambers and Louise Stoney.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. Commissioner Shelf, thank you for bringing up.
For the record, your name, please?
Matt Chambers, Old Northwood, and shop owner on Northwood Road. Commissioner Shelf, thank you for bringing up the process. And the reason the process was important, you've all received an email from me last night, and it's the same email back from November 19th. This process has not felt comfortable for me for a long time, from the start until the end. As you all know, Day by Day was disqualified for what they call lobbying. And where that lobbying came in, I just want to clear the record on that. If I was going to lobby, this room would be filled with 100 people, and there would have been marches outside. I did not think I was lobbying. What happened, and the reason I had sent an email after the CRA Crab Board went ahead with Skunk Works, was to the fact that we did not get to present our case. So the Crab Board didn't know who Day by Day was. They didn't know who Will Davis or who Matt Chambers were, who operated this business. And one of the things is we had a successful business for 4 years across the street in a building that was paying month-to-month rent with no long-term lease. This was an idea for us to come across the street. So I had sent out that email after the decisions were made, I thought. And maybe you guys didn't make the final decision, so I didn't consider that lobbying, and that's why I had asked for a new INF and to give everybody a fair shot. But the process is bad, because what the CRA board, Crab Board saw was a summary of the 3 presentations, including, and it's nothing against you, Steve, or the business you want to bring. The process they saw was a summary of 1 page, including not having Steve be able to present what a barrel room was, or us to be able to present that we have an existing business that might leave Northwood Road because we can't find a place with affordable rent or a long-term lease. So the process needs to be that the applicants absolutely get to present to the Crab Board, and if it wasn't clear. We presented a bunch of pages with all the other things in there, and it's just a summary that didn't include that. So the process is bad, and there's other things that you read in that email. I'm not going to read the email to the public. It's on public record now, but there were a lot of things that were done even after you guys didn't make a decision, like one of the CRA people coming up to me saying, we're going to figure out a way to finagle that building to you, and thinking I was someone else. And it's just felt really bad, and it's leaving a bad taste. I will be happy to see that building occupied. I was the first one to have been fighting for the last 8 years to try to get the shutters down and get the city to get the building back, so I'm glad something's going to happen, but it's still going to leave a sour match. But good luck. Thanks.
Thank you. Louise Stoney.
Hi, I'm Louise Stoney from Old Northwood Neighborhood Association. I also wanted to speak to the process. Many of you know that I've been in this neighborhood for about 5 years. I'm a huge champion of Northwood Village. I shop there and eat there almost every weekend. I also have tried, since I've moved to Northwood, to be involved in the CRA. I've gone to CRA advisory committee meetings. Never once has there been an opportunity for me to speak. Never once has anyone asked us who live in the neighborhood, what's our vision for Northwood Village? I totally respect the decision. I actually like what Steve has done to the forefront. I personally have a problem with more bars in our neighborhood. I would love to see more shops, but I respect that other decisions were made. What disturbs me is that there's not an opportunity for us who live in the community to shape what's happening to the village that is in our backyard. And We have a very active neighborhood association. We do amazing things. We give tremendous amount of our time and our money. We're here. We've offered to help. Never once have we been allowed to do that. So I was at the meeting, by the way, when these three things were presented, thinking, okay, here's a chance for me to speak. And it felt like a total rubber stamp. Here's what's going on, just to prove it. And that's what it always feels to me like at the CRAB Advisory Board meetings. So just want to speak that I too believe it. And forget a dog in the fight. I just think there's a problem with the process here. Thank you.
Thank you. It's all the cards. Commissioner Schoaf.
Thank you, Mayor. I have one request to the process and then some things I'd like to share about the advisory board. Ms. Justice, I don't know if we may be able to make an amendment to run the CRA advisory board much in the way that we run our meetings here, in that citizens may be able to either put in a card or however that function would work to speak to a specific topic, because the only opportunity for them to speak is in public comment at the very end of the meeting. So perhaps if there is a way that we could speak to that board to see if it would be amiable to them to put in per topic that the public could speak, and I think give that opportunity. Secondly, sitting as the liaison for the CRA advisory board, I have gone over this topic with them several times, and I certainly feel for day by day in the process. Great merchant, really committed to Northwood Road and committed to the Merchants Association, and really appreciate Steve bringing a new business to Northwood Road too. In this process, I have spoken with the CRA advisory board and offered them several options. It was, did they want to bring this recommendation back? They saw this presentation twice during this time. There was an option for them to have security in that building. And then there was also presented the opportunity to them, should we take it back out for another invitation? And they very adamantly ask for this recommendation to be brought back to this board. And so that is the premise of which I bring this back today. I think we had some very good proposals anyway to bring activity to Northwood Road and new business, as well as hopefully maintain some of the businesses that we have, because I think it's very important to try to balance all of those. So it is today that I'm bringing back support from the CRA Advisory Board and my support to move this motion forward.
Madam President, you had your hand up second.
Thank you. Thank you to everybody who has presented to us and to the residents and merchants who have spoken about this. I think that, as I'm considering this, I understand our goal of the CRA is to look for ways that we can infuse economic development into this area and to encourage, just more traffic, positive traffic and pedestrian traffic to flow through there. And so it does look like this project does meet that, and I appreciate the CRA Advisory Board's recommendation to this. That being said, I really do appreciate Ms. Stoney's comments about more resident input, more merchant input, and I support Commissioner Schoaf's suggestion to adjusting those meetings in having the public comment time as well as the opportunity for presentations. Thank you.
Commissioner Peduzzi.
Thank you, Mayor. First, let me say I like this project. I think it's a good fit for the area. I don't know whether it's the best project. This is the project, though, that's been presented to us. But as I said, I believe it's probably a good fit for the area. The stumbling point for me just is the fact that we're being asked to convey this property at an amount of $15,000, which I believe is a nominal amount, and we don't even have the benefit of having a market value analysis or anything that tells us what this property is actually worth. We're supposed to be stewards of this money and making sure of property that the CRA and the city owns, and I just want to make sure that we're being wise with our decisions and not giving things away. And it seems to me like this is a little bit of a giveaway at $15,000. I mean, I'm a business person too. I have a law office. I think it would be really neat to have an office in Northwood. And I can tell you, to me, it would be worth more than $15,000. You may not want my law office there. This might be a better fit for the area. But it just seems to me, and that's what I'm struggling with here, is that we don't even know the market value of this place. Is it 15,000? Is it 115,000? Is it 200,000? So that's the issue I have with it. But I do believe that the CRA's board, obviously, and I agree with our mandate, you know, to revitalize and to bring, you know, good to the area, but that's the stumbling block for me.
Commissioner Neary?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess the only thing that I would add is that, you know, the 5 years that I've been on this commission, at this particular location, and to Mr. Chambers' point, quite a few folks have advocated that something be done. And so I will say that, and Commissioner Peduzzi, as you probably know, it's been a long history of just kind of nothing happening at this location, including having shutters up for many, many years. The one thing that I've learned on this dais is that when you reach the finish line, you know, which maybe we'll reach that tonight, there's never a consensus, and I'm okay with that. But what I think is more important, and something that I want to pay close attention to, is the request around the process and just ensuring, I think folks, no matter what direction you move, and decision that you make, at least for me as a commissioner, I can sleep well as long as I know that the process played out and that there was a deliberate and intentional way to make sure that all voices were heard. And again, not that I expect that everyone will agree with the decision, but I'm hoping that this board, and I know that this board is hearing that and how important that is, not only tonight, but as we move forward as a board, and then in 15 minutes as a commission, that it is the process that is so important. And I too appreciate all the residents coming out and talking to that, and appreciate businesses who are wanting to expand and create the type of synergy that we're looking for in our entire city, but especially in Northwood.
To Commissioner Peduzzi's point, I don't think we can ignore the fact that this business is committed to investing $160,000 in terms of construction, and obviously if they don't do that within a certain amount of time, then the property reverts back to the CRA. So yes, they're putting in, they're buying it for $15,000, but they are committing to a pretty significant $137,800 to $137,000 worth of construction off the bat. So I don't see it as a giveaway by any stretch of the imagination. Madam President, you had.
There was a few questions.
Sorry, Commissioner Rouse. Okay.
Yes. I concur with Commissioner Peduzzi in one respect, that I would have loved to have seen the appraisal. That would have given me a little better idea on exactly what we are giving away. But we can't allow the dream of a perfect plan to be the enemy of a good plan. And that spot has been empty for quite a long time. I think that you have a businessman that's proven themselves in the community, and that giving them this opportunity is exactly what the CRA is meant to do. The CRA isn't meant to make a profit, as our former CRA director, John Ward, would often say, but in order to revitalize blighted areas. And so I would be in favor of making sure that we give this opportunity to the winning applicant.
Bless you. Any further comments, questions? Yes, Commissioner Sho.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to clarify, too, that today, and Ms. Justice, I'm clarifying with you, today we are simply approving for you to negotiate. So maybe 15 isn't the price, maybe 20 is, maybe 16 is, I don't know. But this board will be revisited with the whole package before it moves forward. So they have the opportunity to see an appraisal. They have that opportunity down the line to really understand. And again, every proposal that we received had a nominal fee with a large construction. if someone wanted to put their law firm there, they didn't come forward in this process to make a better offer. And so if the market had driven it that way, it would have gone. But I understand your concern of knowing what the value is, and I think there's an opportunity to do that down the line.
Correct.
Madam President?
That was going to be along the lines of my question. Ms. Justice, I don't know if you recall, and unfortunately I couldn't pull it up, what the other two proposals suggested to buy it. I want to say I thought one was even for like $10.
Yes, one was, if I recall correctly, one was 10,000 and one was to donate, correct? To donate the property.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions, comments? If not, I will entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move to approve the CRA Advisory Board's and staff's recommendation of contract award to Skunk Works LLC and direct staff to negotiate a purchase and sale agreement, which will be brought to the board for final approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Further discussion, questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. There is none. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. And we will adjourn at this. I'm sorry.
One more item.
This one. 10. Oh, yes, item 10. Wow.
Snuck on there.
Yes. Item 10, discussion of the recruitment process for Community Redevelopment Agency, CRA Executive Director. Ms. Johnson.
Good afternoon, Board. For the record, Faye Johnson, Interim City Manager. This item is a request for the Board to give us direction on the proposed timeline and action plan that we put together. After your last work session, we updated the job description to reflect that the Executive Director would be reporting to the CRA Board. We also updated the recruitment notice to indicate same. In terms of the timeline, it takes 3 items into consideration. A 90-day time frame, which is what this board indicated a preference for. It also tries to keep the board's regular CRA schedule in place, and it incorporates a community input component. I would ask that the board hear the timeline and keep in mind that it is proposed. It is certainly up to the board's discretion on how you want to amend it. There's really no one way to do the recruitment. It's really is at the pleasure of the board. So with that, I'll ask our HR Director to come up and walk the board through the timeline.
Good afternoon. Excuse me, Mayor, board members, Jose Luis Rodriguez, Chief Human Resources Officer, City of West Palm Beach. We wanted to bring the timeline up, which is in your materials for consideration that we're proposing. This position was posted effective Sunday, and the proposal is to keep it open until the 7th. And we had discussed this previously, and there was a consensus to move forward with that. And it's been is currently being advertised in the Florida Redevelopment Association, the League of Cities, and Florida City and County Management Association. We're waiting to hear back from the Association of Housing and Housing and Redevelopment Officials, and we should be posting it there as soon as we hear back from them. So once the position closes on February 7th, there will be a process where HR will start screening the applications from February 10th through February 14th. That would be also in consultation with the CRA consultant, and that'll be basically an initial review to determine which candidates are qualified. And once the candidates are qualified, we're proposing that all of those qualified applications, resumes, and summaries will be sent to the board members for you all to consider which candidates you want to bring in for an interview. So during the week of the 17th through the 21st is when you would receive those applications, and we would ask you to make selections on which candidates you want to interview. We're going to be suggesting to pick your top 5 that you would like to interview to try to keep the list manageable. Excuse me, still getting over a little bit of a cold here. But what we are proposing is that candidates that at least receive 4 board members that are interested would be the ones that would be brought in for an interview. And we would pick the top 5 of those candidates. And if no candidates, or if there's too many candidates that have 4 or more board members interested in coming in for an interview, we would pick the top 5 that got the most board interest in order to bring them in. And then moving a little bit further along in the process, we would have March 9th as a tentative date where the candidates that have been selected for interviews can have one-on-one meetings with each of the board members, where we foresee about a 1-hour block for you to meet individually with those candidates. And then the following day, there would be a community meet and greet where community members can meet the different applicants in the reception area outside the mayor's office in the second floor between the mayor's office and the commission offices. And then we will have a board discussion, and prior to the board discussion, we would have the candidates go in for 1-hour interview blocks from 1 to 6:30 p.m. And what we foresee there is that you are going to have, we would recommend, about a 45-minute interview window per candidate, with 15 minutes for a buffer just in case you go over. HR would propose a list of at least 6 questions that you can ask so that each board member gets to ask a question. The reason why we propose questions is because in terms of fairness and to assure that the process is above board, all candidates get the same basic 6 questions. That does not preclude the board, after you've asked the mandatory or the standard 6 questions, from you individually asking any follow-up questions of the candidates to clarify any of their answers or any experience that may have not come across in the interview. So after that block of interviewing the candidates, then the board will have some time left over that day to start having discussions as to whether there is a consensus. Sometimes in these types of process, there's an immediate consensus where there's a majority of the board feels that they have a candidate that they want to offer the position to, that they want to rate their top 2, and one of them rises to the top in terms of board support. And at that point, you can make a determination to offer the position during that March 10th board meeting. And you would also have a discussion to reach consensus of the board of how much you want that job offer to be. I did note in there that this position would be proposed as the equivalent of a department director, which is GM 17. So that salary range that we're proposing for this position is between $121,000 to $181,000. So if you can make at the March 10th meeting that decision that you have a candidate that you would like to select, that you have a majority consensus for, and that you have a salary, then the HR process of making that job offer, finishing the background check, and having a start date would be pursued. If you still need more time to consider the candidates, then we're proposing a tentative March 16th special CRA meeting so that you can just further discuss the candidates and make it a selection, with a goal that by April 27th you would have someone on board and starting. And again, this is your process as the CRA board, so we're open to any suggestions or modifications you would like to make to these suggestions.
Any questions? Commissioner Shove?
Thank you very much, and thank you for the presentation. I think my question, Ms. Johnson started out this conversation by saying that some of the parameters had been clarified in the job description, et cetera, about how this board, this position is somewhat different than another city position. And I think that's been something that's been stressed by this entire board, is how we're codifying that as a process, both for this edification and for future administrations when all of us are far gone off of this board. So I know it's documented here. What is the plan going forward for having it documented in a formal way through a city procedure, be it a resolution, or I'm not sure the mechanism that gets that documented?
That'll be an interlocal agreement, correct?
Okay, I was about to say, I was going to defer to the city attorney.
One of the things that you'll be seeing at your next meeting is an amended interlocal agreement that includes in it the fact that this board does the hiring and oversees the position of executive director on behalf of the CRA. So you'll have that interlocal agreement that says between the city of West Palm Beach and the CRA board. That's an official document that will be in your records that you can refer to for future. As it relates to the process itself and how you get there, you're really governed by sunshine law and other things as it relates to the selection, but that's really practice as opposed to a policy that you'd put in a resolution or ordinance
So
or
that-
interlocal.
That interlocal agreement would exist until the point where it was brought before this board again and
Somebody
canceled.
else does something with it, correct?
Thank you.
Madam President.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I appreciate that we're moving forward in a rapid fashion to get this position posted and filled. At our last work session, RMA discussed possibly looking at their current staffing model or structure to make sure that we're not overburdening or, asking too much of the staff that we do have on hand. Are they coming back to us with that proposal, or how are we going to discuss that further?
Well, I think what I heard them say, if we went beyond 90 days, then they thought we would need to make an adjustment in terms of the staffing. So we really tried to keep that in mind. Now, that's not to say that they won't come back, but if they do, that will be a discussion that will be had with the mayor and then brought back to the CRA board. But I think it was if it went beyond a 90-day time frame.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Commissioner Baduzzi.
Thank you, Mayor. And I assume that we've done some research with regard to similarly sized CRAs when determining what kind of pay scale or pay grade. Could you talk a little bit about that, or at some point, could you let us know if other similarly sized CRAs, what they're paying their executive directors to make sure that we are certainly attracting someone who would be a suitable candidate?
We can certainly have that backup data for you. I think with the salary range that you have, it's very competitive, but in terms of that specific data, we will collect that and have it as part of your backup.
Thank you.
Commissioner Neary.
Thank you. Just kind of going back to your request, at least from my vantage point, I think that this is a very good timeframe and schedule of activities. And I'd be happy to kind of support moving forward with the way that it's outlined.
And Mayor, if I could, I would like to just make certain that the board zero in on the fact that it's the top 5 applicants we would be bringing to you. So if you want that change, we can do so.
I think 5 is a good enough number. Any other questions? Okay, does that give you enough direction?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, we will formally adjourn the CRA meeting, and we will reconvene as a city commission in 2 minutes, 5:01 p.m.